I don't know about you, but me and a lot of my friends end up saying things like, we're fed up with life and we wish we could just run away to a cabin in the woods and live with a bunch of cats and animals and do our medicine and never have to deal with society again. I have actually met someone who's done that. So today our guest is really special. I'm really excited to talk to Brooke because she is a registered nurse turned holistic medicine woman who lives out in the middle of the woods in a cabin with quite a few feral cats.
Yep.
So stay tuned today and we're going to hear some fascinating stories, and I know we're really going to be able to help you in your life. Welcome to the Crystal Zinn podcast. I believe our bodies are a living map of the entire universe. All the answers reside within. Remember, you are sovereign, whole, and infinitely valuable. And the best gift we can give to the world is our own healing. Join me as we explore holistic tools, spiritual practices, and paradigms that are shifting the way people experience life, business, and relationships. I love to share education on the most recent medical research and cutting-edge technology on anatomy, neurology, trauma, development, and more to give us a foundation in understanding how to align, utilize, and upregulate our physical systems. Ultimately, this podcast is a witness and support to people on their journey of remembering, an inspiration for all of us to keep going, and a reminder that we are not alone. So welcome to the Crystal Zinn podcast. Welcome, Brooke.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
It's so fun to have you here. So on these episodes, the first thing I do is just tune in. And I know you're a woman of ceremony, so maybe you'll appreciate this. We'll just kind of set the space and give some time for our listeners to just be present. And then we'll go on with our podcast. So if you're in a place where it's safe to do so, go ahead and close your eyes, turn your palms up, and acknowledge your breath. If you're used to a specific way of calling in ceremony, like acknowledging the 4 directions or calling on a higher power, join us in whatever way feels authentic to you. Today we'll acknowledge the spirit of the east, our mind, the air, animals, the spirit of the south, our passion, our fire, the cougar, the wolf. We'll welcome in the west, our emotions, the water elements, and the north, the white buffalo, the body, so that all things are facing inward now. All directions are welcome. And they'll be with us here as we have our discussion for the greatest good of us who are participating and anyone who's listening. Down out of the mind into the body, we're going to take 3 deep breaths. Inhaling, fill up your belly. Exhale, release. 2 more times. And on your final exhale, we'll just set down the ego, any linear archetypes, anything that you're kind of holding yourself beholden to today. And we'll just get curious, learn, have discussions together in the wonder of everything that we are. So blink your eyes open. Your beautiful eyes. If you guys are not watching this episode on YouTube, Brooke has the most beautiful, piercing, light blue eyes.
Oh, thank you.
Oh my goodness. I will try not to stare too deeply in them as we're done. So what I want to say about you right off the bat is that you were a registered nurse turned medicine woman. And I love how you use this word, like helper. So I'm wondering if you'll just give us a little background and additional info about you.
Yeah, before I was a registered nurse, I worked as a CNA for a lot of years, and then I went to nursing school, and I just remember I was like super disappointed after I got my college degree, and I was like, is this how we help people in healthcare? Because my first job was in a nursing home, and we would take probably 8 hours of our 12-hour shift to like pass out medications to people, and everyone was on like sometimes 20, 25 different medications, and I was very disappointed. I was like, did I just go through all my schooling and training for this? And so I'd switch around to jobs and just to find different things that I felt might be a bigger fit. And then like even with my own healing and my own health had led me to other ways. So that really led me to the more holistic things. Not saying one's better than the other, but they need to be paired together, I really feel. And that's like one thing I noticed that healthcare is missing is that spirituality. Like if I go into a doctor, do they ask like, are you getting sunshine? How much water are you drinking? How are you regulating your emotions and different things like that, which I really like see as such a big part of my practice now, is like really assessing people of their emotional health and things that they're willing to change, and simple things like sunlight.
I know, it's crazy. Sunlight, sleep, good food. I'm curious, what set you on your own healing path initially, if you do feel comfortable sharing in any degree?
Well, I do think it was that big disappointment of my first job. It was like, what are we doing to people? Not like, what are we doing to people, but I'm like, this is the way it is. And I remember I used to have a lot of pain in my uterus and my ovaries. And I'd go to doctors and I'd get tests and they'd be like, nothing's wrong. We can't find anything wrong. I'm like, okay, well, if all these doctors for years and years and years can't find anything wrong with me, but this pain is debilitating, that means that it's like up to me to figure it out. So, that's really a big part of what got me into like womb healing and diving into the mysteries and the secrets of the womb, and like how our body holds on to emotions and how our body stores different emotions. Because like an emotion, when you break it down, it means energy in motion. And then when it gets trapped, then it gets stuck in the body. So I always use this example like, okay, so if you broke your femur, the bone of the physical body heals in 6 to 8 weeks. Why does it still hurt? That energy of whatever happened to that experience is not moving. So it kind of gets trapped in the tissue, because it's like, oh, I had this injury years ago and it still hurts. Like the body will heal physically, bones, fascia, connective tissue, everything will pretty much regenerate. And we don't usually look at that emotional component of it, of why it's like, oh, it's still achy even years later. And it's like, okay, so there could be an emotion tied to it, whatever that looks like. So
wow. So that helped you. Where are you at with the womb healing? Like, have you gotten yourself into a different place now? Is there any pain left?
So it's crazy because my first ayahuasca experience was so powerful, and at first I was like, I don't know about this. This is really woo-woo. This is really weird. But like during my ceremony, I puked up like a tar ball that was the size of my ovary, and my pain has been gone since. I was like, okay, there is something to this. It was just one time, and that was, 6 years ago. So it's like my pain has been gone since, and like I do have a little bit of other aches, but nothing in that specific ovary. So I do continue to dive in and like talk to my womb, which sounds like super woo-woo, but it's like your body is constantly listening to you. So it just allows me to dive deeper into what that is, and the traditions and the teachings around the womb and everything. And the womb is like an emotional junk drawer. It holds on to a lot of emotions collectively and personally. So I've worked through a lot of ancestral wounds in my womb and a lot of personal wounds, and it feels so much better. It feels more open. Like my cycles are regular. I used to have very painful period cycles. I used to have a lot of breast tenderness and cramping and like debilitating to where I could not even get up, and like it is night and day with that. And like one big thing that I've been getting into with the womb is like relating it to the cycles of nature, which our culture does not do. So it's like, I just read the book, The Red Tent. I love that book. But it's just like taking that sacred rest and that pause when you're on your moon time to allow, like, because without the pause, there's no rhythm. So it's like these cycles of life need to continue, but they need a pause to recalibrate, and that is something our society is not great at.
No, I love that you mentioned that. There's never any coincidences, but I had read it a long time ago, and I don't think I was ready to hear a lot of it. And so I'm currently like dead in the middle of it again right now. Right now, like with the context that I have now in my life. So I love that you mentioned that and the cycles. And I do want to validate about the emotions. In my I learned one thing about that when I was having a lot of liver issues. It might have been 4 or 5 years ago, and had tried a lot of physical practices. And they were making marginal differences in the moment, but weren't completely healing it. And so I had done another physical, like anatomical liver cleanse, like something that would address my body physically. But this time I had been counseled to address the emotions specific to the liver and thank them and communicate, like while I was doing the process, lay my hands on my liver, communicate with my liver, like kind of do like an internal process of asking it and communicating with it, and specifically around anger and protections and the themes of the liver exactly. And after that, I just never had another issue. Like everything just kind of returned to normal as that cleanse went through, and I attribute it all to my adding in, like you said, not one or the other, but what's called for in this moment, and the most powerful combination of both at the same time. I attributed it to that emotional reckoning that I had done with it in that cleanse. And so I'm wondering if you would be willing to tell us, what are those biggest themes that come up in the womb? Like, what are we mostly speaking to in womb healing?
So a lot with the womb is, it is a lot of shame, and it's a lot of guilt, and like a blockage and a repressed of your feminine creativity, which I think in our society, in this culture, we focus a lot on doing, which is a very masculine quality. We think that just being is like a waste of time, but it's like learning how to just be is, I've read before and I love the way it was worded, it's not a privilege, it's a discipline. Learning how to just be is a discipline that we do not foster a lot. And so sometimes that womb just needs stillness. We need to really talk to the shame. We need to talk to the fear, and just see what comes up. Because I mean, genetically, if you think about it, when your grandma was pregnant with your mom, you were in her womb as well. So we're not only on a DNA level, we kind of go back almost 7 generations. So you think of the culture around women, we couldn't even get a credit card until the 70s or something. Like not even the right to vote even like 100 years ago. So there's a lot there that is suppressing that divine intelligence that is repressed. And like a lot of times our culture wants to put meaning to like creating. Well, I have to create for this and this, instead of just I'm going to create, to explore, to allow myself to just feel that energy moving through my body. So a lot of times when I work with clients with womb healing, it is a lot of shame, and it is a lot of repressed of their own feminine energy. And that depends, because each ovary has a different energy. Like your right ovary is masculine and your left ovary is feminine. So you can tune in deeper into the session of like what you're feeling in a certain ovary, of like, am I creating enough externally, or do I need to create more internally? How is my internal world? How is my outer world? Because I work with a lot of business women who are very much just in that masculine driven, and they don't take time to just be. And one of my big teachers, she's like, you just hang out for 4 hours a day and do nothing. You don't plan meditation. You don't plan breath work. You don't plan anything, and you just be. And I'm like, what? I'm like, you just hang out and like not even meditate? And she's like, no.
What do I do?
Like, what do I do? And it's just like allowing that ability to just like feel in your body and like, yes, obviously you can be breathing and singing, but just seeing what comes up when you allow yourself to just be for a little bit.
And seeing value in that, because that seems like that would be a very difficult shame cycle to break out of. Now I'm doing nothing. Now that means I am not valuable or productive, right? As well. And so practicing sitting there. That's funny you mentioned that, because it reminded me of last weekend when I was down training my new horse, and the horse trainer had said, this horse naturally does have a lot of anxiety. That's why you're seeing these behaviors. And I didn't know that. Like, I wasn't interpreting it that way. I didn't know fully what those behaviors meant on an emotional level, and he's really great at that. So he was like, the biggest medicine for this horse when you work with her and ride her and do all of these things is to pause her in all of these places. Like, he paused her in the middle of when we were climbing down a rock hill, or pause her by the trailer, or pause her when we're stepping halfway over a grate, and start letting her have these embodied experiences of prolonged amount of time where she's still and she's going to try to move or change or go somewhere else, and you just have to keep holding her there, just wait in stillness until she has the embodied experience of, oh, I can just be here.
Oh, wow.
And I'm safe and I'm okay. And that's what it reminded me of, because I was sort of identifying, feeling some of those experiences that she might be having when you said that. When you said, just for 4 hours, don't even plan a meditation or healing or breath work or thing, just be in your body. I felt a little bit of that anxiety and angst come up in me, imagining myself in 4 hours of that experience going, I'm already feeling a time is going to come up where I'm going to feel like there's somewhere else I should be. And learning how, like you said, is a discipline is fascinating. And I can see where it would apply in a lot of other places. And what will we gain by having that discipline?
So a lot of my clients who do practice the pause notice that they're more productive and don't have to do as much. Like business women that are making just as the same amount or more money by pausing. Like, and especially for me, like I have probably worked less the last couple months, allowing myself to do the pause, because like it is a renewal of energy, but also that's when you get like these downloads, because the womb is a portal to the in-between. And it's like all of this information can come in through the womb, and men have this too. It's creative energy in your sacral chakra, essentially. So it doesn't matter if you're man or woman. It is a little different for women because of the birthing process, obviously. But I feel the more you can like practice that, you can embody more. Like in Qigong, the standing pose that we practice, treat like whatever that is, you just practice that for like hours at times.
What are the other practices that you're studied in?
So I am a Qigong teacher.
That's
and yeah, I do foot zoning, and I'm somatically trained with psychosomatic therapy. I'm Reiki certified. I've done martial arts for a long time. And I do have a lot of beautiful teachers that show me like and teach me indigenous ways and just the ways of the old, I like to call it. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I love that, because those practices are kind of color and texture how you hold ceremony. And you were saying that sacral chakra allows for more efficient distribution of energy, giving out, calling in. When you do these practices of the pause, I work with a shaman who calls one practice the sacral chakra yin power up. She calls it your power up practice, and the practice is all of those kind of things, which is really counterintuitive, because she said, when you're ready, ask for this practice. And last year I said, I'm ready. I want the yin power up, because I feel like I'm ready to create more. And then I was thrown for a loop, because the whole practice was a lot of nothing, a lot of reflecting, a lot of pausing, and a lot of imagining what would be the next step. A lot of gratitude and a lot of like accounting for and accumulating like my accomplishments. So it was like a lot of nothing, and I was like, I thought this was a power up practice, but it is, isn't it?
Yeah, and like in Qigong, with just practicing, you know, holding your posture in a very specific way, it really allows your body to just like connect with the earth energies, and it's also overriding your nervous system to like for that impulse, so that you can hold a bigger container to create more, which I don't think a lot of us are really good at. Like you said, even the idea of it brought up anxiety. Can you hold that pose with the anxiety? Can you like, it's the discipline of the focus too. And that just allows energies to move through you easier, which ideas can come in through that way in such a different format. Like ideas don't just come from the brain, they can come in viscerally from all over. But it is the practice of like, and don't they do it in yoga? Like you have to learn the pose of just sitting first, right? That's
yes,
like
so
the
absolutely.
first thing.
So that one is my expertise. That one is a discipline I feel like I've made some really great progress in. And there's hundreds more I want to be better at. But yeah, it's interesting because they say asana just translates to a posture. And a lot of, even the more recent gurus will say a seated posture. So anything you practice, dharana, asana, like any of the other, 7 limbs of yoga, you're practicing, and every purpose of it is so that you can sit for longer. That's why the other practices are there. They're disciplines to train you for the point, and the point is to be able to sit for longer. And I find that fascinating. So we do actually hold poses for longer, get in uncomfortable situations. Yin yoga specifically is great at that, where you put yourself in uncomfortability and you learn to expand the container and do nothing. Do less for longer.
Yeah.
And it has helped me in many areas of my life. And like I said, there's so many other areas, like you just mentioned, that I feel like, wow, I wouldn't have the capacity for that today. But I want it, and I can see from the things I've participated in, I can see what expansive, beautiful gifts it has given me in my work and in the places I've seen it benefit me emotionally and parenting and my relationship and my teaching and my ceremony holding. Like I said, it's hard to put something on a linear, like it's hard to talk about something in a linear way. Like, was I not good at it? Am I better at it? It just is.
Mm-hmm.
But it is worth noticing.
Yeah.
Before this, we were talking a little bit about it, and I had some potent experiences in the last month or two that signified to me that how I'm able to participate, because a lot of that work I liked better.
Oh, yeah.
And in the same breath, there's far to go.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to see the difference, I think, gives you some faith to keep doing the difficult things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like with the stillness, I also pour sweat lodge, and that's another one where you have to practice stillness, but it's like in the stillness, everything can be reconfigured. Because like that is the womb energy. The womb of Mother Earth represents life and death. So you're going in to let the fear, the shame, the guilt, everything, the self-doubt just be purged from you. And you even like crawl out of the structure of like representation of being reborn for the new you, which it is my favorite medicine. Lodge is definitely my favorite. So.
And you hold those twice a month?
Yeah.
How many hours are they in there?
It depends on how many people. Usually it's about 2.5 hours. Wow. So, yeah.
Well, I do hot yoga for 2 hours. Maybe I could survive it. What would you say are some symptoms or contraindications or things that happen when people are not regulated in their womb space, or they do need to process some ancestral things or do some emotional or communicative work? Like, what are the things that we see?
I definitely think looking at how your cycle is, if there's a lot of pain with your cycle, and remembering that each ovary ovulates every other month, so you might have different symptoms with a certain ovary, which can kind of lead you if it's mother's side or father's side. And also just having a lot of fear in general, I feel like, and being very frigid, like not embodying your sexuality or being overly sexual. So those can all be like, it's all that spectrum, right? So it's one extreme and it can swing to the other extreme. And just, you know, a lot of tiredness. A lot of women that I work with are very tired because they don't take that pause. They'll have brain fog. Their hormones will be all messed up, like PCOS, fibroids, different things like that can be symptoms of like that there is work in that sacral area to kind of work on. So yeah, not only the physical symptoms, but also like if you're just not feeling creative, you know, and like you're wanting to create, but again, you have that brain fog and that fatigue that you don't even have the energy to create. That's a big sign that there's probably a pause and that you need to talk to your womb. Like whenever I work with clients, I love it because each womb has her own name and she will tell you when she's ready. But it's like, I'm like, you have to like date your womb and build that trust up with her, and she will tell you her name. And cause like, it's such an embodied way of feeling, is this a yes for me or is this a no? Like asking your body versus your brain. If like, hey, do you want to come over for dinner tonight? And you're like, let me check in, let me feel about it. Instead of let me think about it, let me feel about it. And like, you can feel in your body if it's like open or if it clenches up. It can be like, oh, my body's saying no.
Oh, she's saying no.
She's like,
Sarah says no. They're like, who's Sarah? You're like, don't worry about it.
Don't worry it. She's my best friend. So, but like,
she makes all our decisions.
Right? And I'll even have clients like play with it, like go to the grocery store and like pick up an apple or a cookie and be like, which one would you like? And like, just a way of getting embodied and like letting that intuition start to build and flow through you and in a like a fun way.
Yes.
So
wow, I love that. I can't even imagine how many listeners now are like, oh, my womb is deciding what cereal we're getting this week. But like, you're right, on a fun and superficial level, how cool to build that relationship. But on such an important and sacred level, like how powerful and beautiful to have that as your companion and embodiment for big decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And ways of being, like ways of guiding your life, ways of raising your family, ways of putting your creation out into the world. Like, that's important to have that on. I've noticed that indecisiveness, right, is a symptom of that. And overworking, trust, fear. Those are good ones. Thank you for helping us kind of see the other side of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, can we go back? I want to circle back and double click on once again at the very beginning, because such a beautiful discussion. And I still do want to know, how did you transition to living out in a cabin in the woods in the middle of nowhere? So this healing process is going on, right? You decided not to be a nurse anymore after trying several different jobs and trying to heal yourself.
Yeah.
And then how did that opportunity present itself?
Man, it was just kind of like, I really just wanted, I was like looking at hospitals and I'm like, I want to create my own idea of a hospital. So I see the cabin as a hospital and a church. Like the people of this community I built with Sweat Lodge, with the other things that I do, they all feel safe and they just love the cabin so much. So I'm like, I want, community is a great way of creating belonging and healing. So I'm like, I can't really do that in the city. I want the vibration to resonate with what I want. I'm like, and I can probably help people better if I don't live in the city for my body. So there's very specific things. I'm like, I wanted adult trees. There had to be a river, like all these, like it had to be backed by a mountain. And me and my sister own it together. And it was so funny the first day we went there, I just think of Beauty and the Beast and Gaston, like how he was an avid hunter. This cabin had like animals hanging all over, and Darcy, my sister, was just like, this cabin is terrible. I'm like, wait, we're on 5 acres. We gotta go like check out the backyard.
Yeah.
I'm like, and it was winter and it's super snowy up there. So I'm just like hiking into the backyard, and I just looked at the backyard. I'm like, I don't care what the cabin looks like. This is it. And it's so funny. We asked for, because we're kind of in the woo-woo, so we're like, we're gonna ask for a sign if this cabin is ours. And I was like, all right. And so we agreed, like, oh, our sign should be bunnies. And we're like, are we gonna see bunnies in the winter? Like, they're probably like in their little dens, like staying cozy and warm. And so right after we looked at the cabin, I was hanging out with my friend, and she's like, oh, my sister's FaceTiming me. She never FaceTimes me. And she's like, oh, I'm in the desert, and just look at all these bunnies crossing the road. I was like, what?
Yeah. It brought you bunnies.
Yes,
not
it brought us bunnies.
And
so, yeah, so we put an offer on the house, and there was a lot of other offers, and we got it. And I mean, it's been definitely a labor of love, because like the cabin is my life. The community is my life. Like that is my full-time gig. And it's like, it's taught me a lot of things about resilience, especially being a single woman who doesn't have a husband, who lives in the middle of the mountains by herself. So it's definitely taught me a lot. Not all of it's been easy, but I think it's all been beautiful, and it just expands my capacity to hold space for people in a different way too.
Yeah, that's powerful. That is admirable and inspirational, and I want to be you. I think, because we all think we can do it, right? But what it actually entails is like, I can see a piece of it, and wow, that's not for the faint of heart. I was riding my horse in the mountains a couple months ago too, and like kind of far in, and ran into someone running the trail who I actually knew from yoga. And I was like, what? So I stopped my horse. He was like, what are you doing out here? And I was like, just riding. What are you doing out here? And he was like, we're running. Which is common here, actually, in Utah. People are really great at that. We have the best trails on earth, actually. I think we have the most mileage of taking care of trails in Utah than like in the entire United States.
That's cool.
And I believe it. But he had looked at me and he goes, like, I was like, well, have a nice day. And he goes, you out here by yourself? Well, I was like, yeah. And I had my 2 dogs with me, and he was like, he had this look on his face, and he said this, which I don't think this is what he meant, but I remember the look, and I remember the sentiment, which made me laugh. And he was like, you know how to do that? And I was like, do what? And he was like, be out here, like be out here by yourself. And not that I'm amazing or like anything like that, but I was just using that story to illustrate a point that I felt really confused by his question.
That's funny.
But later in clarity, I was like that is the given like understanding, like especially for a woman, but anyone really, like we don't know what we can do. We don't know how powerful it is, and people couldn't really. He'd probably say the same thing to you. He'd be like, "Wait, you know how you're living, like you're existing. You know how to be out here," and you're like, "Well, yeah, I know how to get food. I know how to do the thing." It's kind of like this awe-inspiring thing. That's like.
Well, I have a funny story because, like, I met my neighbor for the first time. Like, people aren't super social up there, and I had a friend who was helping me with the greenhouse, and we were going to ask my neighbor to use his tractor, and he just kept assuming that my male friend was, like, my husband. And I was like, no, I live here alone, and he kept ignoring that and being like, you and your husband. And, like, my other neighbors, he's like, this is Brooke and her partner who live here, and we're like, no, I live alone, and they couldn't even hear it. Or they just weren't listening, but they like couldn't even hear it. I'm like, no, hear you. Yeah. I'm like, nope, I live here by myself.
He was like, that's not an option.
So that's not possible.
So this is the true story.
Yeah. I was just like, very interesting.
Yeah. Have your husband come over and I'll lend him the tractor. You're like, my husband is not my husband and lives in the city, so I need your tractor.
Like, I need your tractor, not him. It was very comical because we both kept correcting him and we're like, whatever.
He's not hearing us.
We're not going to correct you anymore.
It was that kind of thing. It was that kind of look. And I thought, man, there's something to be said for building that self, like resilience and confidence in yourself, which is really cool. And like back to you, that's not easy. I can't even imagine the experiences you've had. What's one of the coolest / hardest / funniest? What's an experience you want to share with us being up there by yourself?
Being up there by myself, I mean, the snow gets crazy deep. Last winter was really, like, you couldn't even see out my front window because there was snow all the way to the roof. It was like an ice castle. And I just remember, like, being out there with my little snow blower being like, all right, I need to get married or something because I don't know if I can do this.
You're digging a tunnel.
Yeah.
You're like buddies.
I'm like, oh, I can't make it up here anymore. And but with the community I built, they all helped me buy a snowplow for my cabin. And I was just like, they're like, Brooke, you do so much for us and hold so much space. Like, people were happy. Because at first I'm like, I feel weird, like, doing this. But my mentor's like, well, if it's a church and, like, people are there to support you, like, yeah do it.
Receive. Like, give and take the blessings.
Yeah.
Equally. That's an important part of ceremony.
That is an important part. So, that was a big part of me learning to receive. And just, like, every year, it just builds more and more. And it's just, it's so fun. So, yeah.
That's super cool. And they come up from those cities around you.
Yeah. Yeah, people even drive from, like, this area up to me. From where you are.
I would.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I bet a lot of more people will want to know. And we'll link at the end for sure how to contact you and stuff. Because when you were first there, you didn't have service. Because you didn't have Wi-Fi or anything.
No, I didn't there. For the first 6 months I was up there. I'm like, I hope I can read your smoke signals. Like how to get a hold of me, because I had nothing.
Flash those little light signals off the edge of the mountain and then
pretty
have
much.
The relay. Oh my gosh. Yeah, what did that feel like? Like, what does that feel like emotionally? Like, what are the spiritual learnings? I feel like that is just an intense, like, ashram or, like, silent vipassana meditation type experience.
It was a lot of things. It was really good, though, because I had, like, a lot of books I could read, and it was just, like, I remember the first night I moved into the cabin, and it was just so quiet, because I used to live in the city, and it was a little freaky. I'm like, it's so dark, there's no street lights, like, it's so quiet, and, like, I couldn't sleep the first night, but now, like, if I spend the night at someone's house, I'm like, oh, I can't sleep down here, and, like, it just feels like such a beautiful dark cave to sleep in, and it's so calming and relaxing, and now I loved it. Like, I I had 5 acres. I'd like lay naked in the backyard reading a book. I'm like, no one can see me because like I'm so out in the middle of nowhere. I'm just like frolicking like this little feral cat laying in the sun. So
like it just sounds so magical, you know. It just sounds like I want to do that. Okay, so you mentioned feral. So the house came with a bunch of feral cats.
It did.
So you weren't alone.
I was not alone.
You were adopted into a community.
Yeah, I have my 2 dogs, and then like, I did meet one of my neighbors, and they're like, "Oh yeah, the old owner would always feed these cats, so they just kind of hang out there." I'm like, "Well, I guess I gotta continue feeding them now." And like, I have this old feral cat compound where I built them all their own little houses, and like,
cute. You're just building hosting community everywhere.
I know. I'm like, oh, don't mind. That's just the feral cats, and yeah, they're very special to me now. I just had to put one down on Saturday, which was really hard. But it's just kind of part of the way of life out there, and yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit. I don't know if you're feeling intuitively like we should touch on that. That is something that keeps coming up for me surrounding death ceremonies and how we handle that. And I think you have a unique perspective watching how that's handled in the Western medical world and kind of being put right in end of life care for your first stint.
Mm-hmm.
Which, wow, my dad did that at the end of his career, end of life care, which he's just expressed so many stories and how eye-opening that is, that learning, but to be faced with it right from the get-go is a crazy awakening. I wonder what you want to share about that.
I've been around death a lot because even as a CNA, I remember the first person who passed away on me, I was like 19. So like the CNAs in a nursing home are the ones that will clean up the body before the morgue comes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I've been around it a lot, and then I've been around it a lot at the hospital, and I did do hospice care for 4 years. And so I've always been very respectful of death. And like one thing that's like really interesting at the cabin is like honoring roadkill or animals that have been hit. And for some reason, like just bringing that respect and that honoring and being able to witness it feels so powerful, even though it's so hard. Like,
how do you do it?
I'll usually go and offer tobacco and call in the directions and just say a quick prayer. And sometimes I live up in the Wild West, so sometimes a moose will get hit and people will just quarter and eat it, like right there on the road. So I will always, it's such a different way of life out there, and like
circle of life, I guess.
And it really just, it kind of freaks people out sometimes about that, but it's like that can feed so many families, and it's actually good organic meat, and it's going to honor the animal in such a beautiful way of doing that. And like you can get permits from DNR, and like there are ways of doing it. And so sometimes I got a moose recently and it fed like 5 families, and it just blessed us with so much meat. And I just like, anytime I do pick up an animal, I will honor it and I will sing to it. Cause like I have gotten deer, and you know, we'll turn their hides into drums and rattles. Or I've gotten a skunk, and like in indigenous ways, each animal has its own medicine. So I see myself as sharing this medicine with the community in an ethical way because it's already there. It's not something I had to go out of my way to get. So just bringing that in, and just like thinking of my times of working in the hospitals and just how we shy away from death, and how I really don't do that. I don't think I ever have. And like, I do think that is one of my gifts of like holding space for people, is holding space for all of that, because it doesn't make me squeamish. It's like, and just knowing in my beliefs that it's just another type of rebirth is, you know, but none of us really know. We can guess and we can try to think. So I'm going to choose to believe that it is another rebirth. But yeah, I remember even working in the hospitals when we'd have patients passing away and the doctors wouldn't even want to talk to the families about it. They'd be like, no, we can't talk about that. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to. Because like as a nurse, you take an oath. And that oath means I will always stand up for what I feel is best in my patient's interest. And that even means I've had a lot of conflicts with doctors because of that. Because I don't think of it, the hospitals, in the way like it is a business, and yes, we're there to make money and blah, 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 blah. And that's always been a hard part for me, because at the end of the day, I want to be there for my patient. I want to be there for them. And like, even with hospice, like I would be there for my patient, but it'd be so limited because of insurance and the influence that it had. And I'd have to do all like 4 hours of charting when I got home. And like, I'm like, no, I just want to be there for my patient. I don't want to worry about all that. So that was always an internal battle. And like, and also that doctors just couldn't have these honest conversations. Like, your loved one is not going to make it. And instead of just like being completely honest and accepting the reality as it is, so we can work around other ways of like, okay, do you want to go home to pass away? Do you want to pass away here? Like, what does that look like? We don't talk about it a lot. We don't talk about death. It's like very brushed under the rug in this society, in this culture.
And I think the symptoms, avoiding the hard things, especially surrounding death, you could liken to avoiding hard things in other areas. Like, we know that causes dis-ease in the body and in the society and in the mental and in our spirits. And so avoiding walking towards the ceremony and process and honesty and beauty of the death ceremony as well, I think causes a lot of dis-ease in family systems and our spirits. And even though it seems sometimes like an impossible task to go running towards a death and witness it, right? And that we've been taught, I think that's where like a lot of the medicine lies, like how you're honoring those animals. And the more you're doing it and the more you've done it, the more you can hold space for it. And I just like, sometimes I ponder on like, what are the symptoms of not doing that? And then every time it's been honored and done, it seems to, how would we say it? It seems to not go away, resolve itself. Like a beautiful way of talking about it, it seems to integrate and be a part of life, and just be sort of an embodied practice of something we can live with. Whereas when I've seen other, here's a very light, easy example. My black cat got hit by a car, and it was one of our favorite cats a couple of years ago. And we didn't know. It was hit down the road, and my neighbor saw it and told my husband. And he didn't tell us.
Oh no.
And so there was like this cloud hanging over us for months where we didn't know where the cat had been. And he thought it would be better for us to think it ran away or found a new home, or it's happy out on the farm, you know, like, where did this animal go? Oh, they just found a new home. But what I got to feel in a little way, the contrast of sort of like that lie to your spirit to when he did finally tell us. And I felt like it felt bigger than it would have been. And we had to tell all the kids, and we did have to hold ceremony. And now, whether it's our family member or a family member of a friend, or like one of my best friends passed away last year, or one of my kids' animals, or like, there have been, you know, all varying degrees of death. And wrapping an animal up and disposing of it without witnessing it brings like just sort of this darkness of spirit over like the house, like that we can feel. And so I just try to, like, we've tried to be better at as quickly as possible, just go towards the difficulty of really honoring that and letting it be, and holding space for really difficult emotions and loss and grief. Because the other is, I just think, an invisible burden we're not seeing. And I wonder, like, when we just kind of go out, what you see that causing in society, like when people come to you and they've not processed some of that death. I've had people come to me and lay here on this couch that haven't processed death from a decade ago, 20 years ago. And I wonder what that's doing to our society, holding death in that regard. And I wonder what we're moving towards.
Well, I mean, with repressed grief and everything in Qigong, grief is stored in the lungs. So it's a lot of repression in the lungs and the ability to take life in. And one thing that I think is interesting about some of these ancient cultures is they would hire mourners to grieve for the community, which it helps that heaviness of that burden to start to shift.
Really?
Yes.
So like people from another tribe or something would come?
Yeah, they would hire, usually it would be traditionally women who would just mourn and wail. Like, they would use sound and they would cry very loudly, but that helps to shift the vibration of the grief, because grief is a heavier emotion. It's very tiring, it's very heavy, and you know, it's a lot for one person to carry on alone, but if we can all witness it together, it helps it kind of dissipate in a little different way. And also, one thing about witnessing grief and death, it's like, it's accepting your reality, which I think is very empowering, to know that I can just accept whatever comes to me. It's that trust, it's that surrender, trust, surrender of like really embodying life to the fullest, even that part. Because when we ignore it, it's almost like a type of toxic positivity. It's fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. That's not authentic. And so there is a different type of being authentic when you can accept the things as they are, to start to shift and move the energy through the body and the earth and the planet. Because there's been so much that we just brush under the rug, and it's a heavy vibration that can be very sticky.
Wow, I love that. And I love that knowledge you just gave to me, and that it's singing in vibration. That's cool. Some of the Nordic and Icelandic and music I've been practicing lately, I have found this one new teacher on Instagram that does online things, and her she was teaching about that language, and she was saying when you hear this phrase in a song, especially if it sounds kind of like ethereal, this phrase means it's a mourning song. Like in those cultures, they would have very specific songs that you would sing like for mourning and for a funeral versus for a childbirth or like whatever. And that my mind went like, of course, why don't we have that? And that reminds me of what we were talking about, feeling called to hold singing circles. Have you done that? Are you going to do that soon?
Yeah, we just did one recently, and I do have like a little circle of friends where we just bring our instruments and play songs and sing together. We just kind of jam out. But it is such a powerful thing to gather, to shift the things of like using sound and music and vibration. I mean, in a lot of indigenous ways, your song is your prayer, and it shifts everything, and then you incorporate dance and movement in with it, and it just shifts energy in such a way that like our logical minds don't really get it, I don't think.
Yeah.
I feel like my body trusts it though, so it's just like, I don't know what's happening, but it feels right, man. Like whatever the singing is doing, it's gonna like be such a huge thing. And like, even if you think of it from a scientific level, when you sing, your voice is its very own frequency to open up, to resonate in your own body, which increases blood flow, which increases oxygenation, which increases like neuroplasticity of just like singing of your own voice. And there's been studies of just even like, you think of when you go to church, or every culture has singing.
Yeah, when you gather in communities, and there's always singing.
And it always just feels good. No matter like, my friend goes to many different churches just because she likes it, and like she's been to ones that only speak Spanish, but she's like the same vibration all around. When we're in community and singing, it feels the same. It doesn't matter what they're saying. It's the gathering and singing together. And you know, singing does open up the heart, and it's like expressing ways of our signature self that, you know, words don't have like meaning for, because it is a frequency.
I love that. And all of these things we've been talking about today too are just, they can all be viewed in the container of different ceremonies, right? Like this podcast is a ceremony, the sweat lodge, the gathering the circles, the death ceremony, I mean the singing circles. It's like ceremony just seems to be, once again, the overarching theme, like the cyclical nature of moving through the 4 directions in a ceremony, moving through the womb cycles. It just seems like it's bringing us closer to just our authentic selves and embodiment of our experiences. That's how I view ceremony. What would you say about ceremony?
I think ceremony and rituals are really powerful, because it not only aligns us with the ancestors, but it makes our intention stronger. And intention is so powerful, because a lot of us can go around living life just kind of aimlessly, but when you bring intention into your life, it's just so much more potent, I feel like, because you're fully embracing it, you're fully living it. And so when you have these little rituals of like, okay, I'm gonna, like, it's like washing your face, you know, washing your face is a ritual, you know, just like washing your face and then washing off the day with that just adds a little more to it. Like taking a shower and washing the day off you and feeling that energy and that stress decompress you. And ceremony, when we have something specific in the community, it just aligns us in that intention and to the things, the ethereal things that a lot of us don't really pay attention to. It just aligns it that much more. And
I love that.
I think it's super powerful.
This is such a cool conversation to have today because it's filling my soul and it's reminded me of so many things that are available, you know, at my fingertips, tools, and you're super inspiring, and the way you talk about things is
thank you.
is just very gentle and truth-filled and embodied, and I really love it. Before we end, I'm actually wondering, is there anything kind of on your heart or anything you want to convey or share, messages, things that are coming up in the collective?
An interesting thing that has been coming up is the new Barbie movie, which made me cry, and I thought it was so spiritual.
Oh,
but it's all about feeling, right? So it's interesting because I see people like really love the Barbie movie, or some people who are just like, that was so dumb. But I'm like, if you like, it's all about learning how to feel all your emotions, and a lot of people just want to get rid of what they call the negative ones. And I don't think that's ever going to happen, because this is a spiritual embodiment in the human, and the human is the senses and the feelings and the emotions, and we don't feel better, we get better at feeling. We learn to be, and that's a lot of what I teach, is how to be in your body and feel all the emotions, because they don't go away.
Again, we don't feel better,
we get better at feeling.
we get better at feeling.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I think that's like, a lot of people come to see me and they're like, I want you to like take my anxiety away. I'm like, well, that's not kind of how it works, but we teach you how to be in the body to allow the emotion to move differently. So, because when it gets stuck, then the anxiety constantly comes up. But I'm like, I ask people a lot, I'm like, are you in your head resisting the anxiety? And they're like, yes. I'm like, well, what if you just felt it and just fully took a deep breath and you were able to be present in your body? It shifts it faster than in your head. You're like, I want this anxiety to go away. I want this anxiety to go away. Instead of being like, I'm just going to be in anxiety right now, or I'm going to feel my anger. I'm going to feel my anger in the body, and naming where you're feeling it in the body can like just teach you how to be more embodied, which was kind of what we're, in my mind, is what I'm here for, is to use that spirit to use these senses with my hands, my feet, my senses, my hearing, my smell, my touch, all those things of just being embodied.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing of yourself and your heart and your experience. It's just all very exciting to me, because I feel like it's just very inspiring and helps us feel together and seen and more connected when we can voice out some of these things. And whatever part I can be of that, whatever I feel called in the way I'm doing this podcast this year, I have seen a lot of people putting material out there in the last year or two that has actually helped me. And I've been like, wow, there is something said for people being brave and being willing to like share like that every once in a while, because I know it'll land where it's supposed to land. People will hear what they're supposed to hear. How can people connect with you or get a hold of you or see what's going on with you?
They can go to my Instagram,
Okay.
Brooke Benicosa at Instagram, I think it is. And then my website is just brookebenicosa.com. It's not very creative. It's just my name. Easier for people to remember, but there's a lot of information on there with like somatic therapy or different things like that. I don't post Sweat Lodge. That for me is just kind of word of mouth. But if you're interested, you can message me on Instagram about Sweat Lodge and different things like that, because it's a beautiful medicine, and the property in itself is beautiful, and it's just secluded, and it just is calming, and it's beautiful community. You can meet a lot of people there.
I love that. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. This has been so fun.
You're welcome. I appreciate it. And you guys know where you can always get a hold of me listening to this podcast. Instagram at Crystals in Yoga. I'm the one answering those messages there. So if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. If you want to know anything more about my guests and you forget, I can get you in contact with them as well. So have a beautiful day. Sat Nam.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Connect with me on Instagram at Crystals in Yoga. Subscribe on my website at crystalsinyoga.com to receive tools and practices for your holistic journey. and to be the first to know about offerings, workshops, trainings, and retreats. We live in powerful times that require courage, bravery, compassion, authenticity, community, and grounding. You're not alone. Check out my free content, classes, and meditations on YouTube under Crystal Zinn Yoga, and have a beautiful day. Sat Nam.